Welcome everyone to this AMEC Awards webinar call. I'm Barry Leggiter and I'm CEO of AMEC. The purpose of the webinar today is to help you write a killer award entry. And we've got two very experienced people in the room, Emily Morgan, Managing Director of Consumer Life at Red, and Paul Hender, Director of Gorkana, to help you do it. They're going to share the secrets of writing a winning awards entry. As we go through the webinar, you can use the webinar keypad and laptop to send in your questions, and we'll deal with those at the end. But let me first introduce you to Paul Hender.
Barry, thank you very much. My role at Gorkana is I'm the head of Insight. So one of my responsibilities is compiling and submitting AMEC awards. This is me at the back. I'm the one with no hair. And I've got a sense of relief on my face because this picture was taken, I think, midnight on June the 4th at the AMEC Summit in Stockholm. As things were starting to get a bit messy. The reason I've got a sense of relief on my face is that we had just had our largest haul of AMEC awards. I think we've got 12 official awards, including 5 golds. And so this was a good moment, as you can see. And what I wanted to do this afternoon was to take some of the experience that I've gone through of writing these entries and really convey what I think goes towards making a winning entry. And I think one of the best ways of doing this is to share a specific example. So of all the awards we won, the one I'm going to pick is perhaps a lesser-known organisation. It's a science and innovation charity called Nesta. They won the AMEC Gold for Best Measurement for a Not-for-Profit campaign. I've chosen this for a couple of reasons. One is that it's an example of a small organisation, didn't have a lot of resource, hadn't actually really done analysis before. The second is that I had a personal involvement in the story, and that story begins back in the summer of 2014. I was asked to do a guest lecture to students on the Marketing and PR course at Greenwich University in London. And for those that know it, the university is actually an incredible location. It's by the Naval College. It's next to the Royal Observatory, built in the 17th century. And the observatory was originally built to solve the problem of how to measure longitude, which is how far east or west you are if you're a ship. And this was a big problem for naval navigation in the 17th century. Now, I was looking for a hook for my lecture, and I thought, well, to frame this, why not I liken analysis to the navigation tools you would need to steer through the increasingly vast and dangerous media ocean. I told the story of the Longitude Prize, which was a £10 million award brought by the British government to whoever could solve the problem of measuring longitude. So the lecture went well, the students seemed engaged, and I went home, and that was that. But that evening, by quite an incredible coincidence, on the news, there was announcements of a new Longitude Prize. And this was to search for a solution for a more modern challenge from an organisation called Nesta, who, by another coincidence, that turned out to be one of our clients. So very excitedly, I went in the next day and I went up to Carsten, who looks after Nesta, and I said, look, this is what's happened. And I said, we have to do an analysis of this campaign. He said, okay, but slight challenge, they don't do any analysis. So I said, well, not a problem. Why don't we just go and see them? So I saw them, and it turned out that the PR manager, by another coincidence, used to work for the PR agency, a very small PR agency, that founded Metrica, which was the measurement company I spent 15 years with before Metrica became part of Gorkana. So we had a great meeting, and we talked about, well, why don't we do an analysis report on the campaign? And this is something they hadn't really considered before. So I thought, well, how are we going to approach this? So the first thing we did was to build a measurement framework. So we aligned what we were trying to measure with the objectives of what the organisation was trying to achieve. So to do this, we started with Nesta's overall strategic objectives, and then link this to the specific objectives of the Longitude Prize campaign itself. And there are three real main objectives relating to three key audiences for Nesta. The first was building an active engagement with the public. And they were going to do this by getting to vote for one of 6 major scientific challenges which could be the recipient of the prize money. And they'd set themselves a target of getting 100,000 people via Longitude Prize website to register for a vote. The second goal was to attract potential recipients, and these would be scientists, engineers, and researchers who would actually work to solve some of these challenges to pre-register for the prize. This would give Nesta a database of professionals who would be interested in addressing the winning challenge. And finally, the third audience was to leverage and strengthen some of the strategic partnerships that Nesta had, such as government bodies, commercial partners such as Amazon, and the BBC. The latter was really important, as much as the publicity around the prize would come from coverage on flagship BBC programs such as Horizon, The One Show, and various news channels, such as the one I'd seen that evening. We'd have specific KPIs to measure these objectives, from how the coverage was driving social media engagement through to registrations of potential recipients, and of course the number of votes. And finally, this cascaded down into the specific goals and metrics of the media campaign itself. So that's what we wanted to measure. What did the results look like? Well, first of all, the results showed us really strong pickup in terms of the overall quantity and reach of coverage. But clearly, just as importantly, was the quality as well as the quantity of coverage. And we measured this in various ways, including the mentions of partners, the delivery of messages, very strong pickup in message delivery. 91% of coverage featured a key message. One of the media goals was to achieve a balanced coverage of each of these 6 challenges. Because the public had to vote, there had to be a balanced promotion of each one, so in order not to show any particular bias. When we looked at this, the team had actually done a really good job in mainstream media. But in social media, you could see that certain challenges were getting promoted more than others. And looking at this further, it appeared that there were third-party organizations that were taking some of the challenges and getting their own publicity off the back of it. An example being the Alzheimer's Society, who proactively promoted dementia as a challenge that should win the prize. Now, this was a really important learning on how to measure future phases of the campaign, particularly through social media. It also helped to show which way the voting was likely to go. Antibiotics, if you notice, was the second largest, received the second largest highest share of shout, and actually was the challenge that went on to win the public vote. Clearly, one of the most important things was to try and get people to vote. We were able to show that the vast majority of coverage actively called on people to vote. So 73% of coverage had this call to action. We were also able to show that the coverage had reached Nesta's target audiences. And we were able to do this by linking the media coverage itself into some additional market research. Nesta ran some further market research that showed that most of the potential recipients of the prize had registered because they had seen coverage. Again, we were linking the media coverage to what was actually achieved and how the target audiences had reacted to it. We were able to show how the mainstream media coverage had driven social media discussions. We showed that there was a very strong correlation between mainstream media and social media. So far, so good. We've got lots of coverage. It says the right things. It mentions Nesta's partners, encourages people to vote. It's reached the right people. It's driven social media engagement. But what's our key objective? Trying to get people to vote. So how have we done with this? Well, when we plotted the media coverage against voting, and we did this, the proxy for this was through website traffic to the specific website, we noticed that the correlation wasn't actually very strong. And investigating further, you can see there's a big spike at the end of June. And investigating, this was caused by an email campaign from Nesta's partner, Amazon, who were supporting the campaign. And I think this is a really good lesson that you shouldn't measure PR activity in isolation, particularly when you're dealing with multiple types of marketing activity. So to understand this further, we got one of our analysts to build an econometric model to show how these different elements combine. And this showed that although the Amazon activity generated the biggest peak in traffic, the longer burn time of mainstream and social media actively contributed to about half of the overall web traffic and resulted in Nesta breaking through their overall target of registering more than 100,000 votes. So when we submitted this as an award, I was really delighted that although some of other charity clients, such as the Stroke Association and UNICEF, won awards, the Gold Award went to Nesta. Some of the judges commented how the case study defined goals, it presented the results, it integrated analysis across different marketing channels, it produced insights that we could learn from, and it focused on outcomes as well as outputs. But I think the point I'd really like to emphasize is this last point, that we've really taken Nesta on a journey from not really being aware of analysis at all through to winning an AMEC Gold Award. And what that has done is Nesta can now really see the value from their analysis and have built measurements into their ongoing activity and using the insights to improve what they're doing, but also to demonstrate the value of communications back to the business. So if I was going to take what I've learned from this, and indeed what I've learned from some of these other examples, how do I summarize it? Well, I think there's two broad elements. I think the first is not to leave the award entries as an afterthought. I think you should build enough time and resources into building AMEC entries. I'll give you an example of how we do it. We actually have an internal competition this year with a Wild West theme called Panning for Gold. We actually launched this back in October. And we asked account teams to come up with a series of internal presentations where they showed what they felt were good examples of client work. We had a judging panel internally. We drew a short list from this and which ones would turn into a full award entry before the deadline in February. So I think the first thing is to plan and put the resource in. But the second, I think, is to be sensitive to what the judges are looking for. And I think there are a number of areas here. The first, and I think Emily will talk in a bit more detail, so I'll just summarize it, allow Emily to give a bit more detail. The first is really to demonstrate that there's a strategic purpose for what the organisation is trying to do. Is it raising awareness of an issue, building public engagement as it was with this, as it's selling more smartphones, and how is communications and the measurement of the communications achieving that? To help with that, I think it's important to state clear objectives, both of the communications activity and the measurement, that those objectives should then link to tangible results, not just in terms of the media outputs, but how this has changed audience outcomes and, of course, the organisation results, both points relating to the first point around strategic value. State what we've learned, using the Wild West theme again, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think it's important not just to show what worked well, but to show what didn't work well. What can we learn and how can we improve it? I think finally, remember that judges are human beings. They're busy people with day jobs. They tend to have to read lots of AMEC entries in their spare time. Make this a bit easier for them. Try and make your entry, bring it to life a bit. You know, tell a compelling story, use interesting and relevant visuals. And finally, best of luck in your entries. I hope you'll have success, but not too much success, as I think I might find myself out of a job. So that's my perspective from a measurement company. Let me bring in Emily now, who can give you a perspective from a PR agency. Emily, over to you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Emily Morgan. I work at the Red Consultancy. Red is well known for winning awards. You can see on the slide we're up to 98. I'm actually off to some awards this evening. We're hoping to inch towards 100 in the next couple of weeks. But I would say, as an agency, it's not our strategy just to create award-winning work. Our strategy is to create great work that clients buy and that works for their businesses. And I think there's a lot to be said about campaigns which are immensely successful and do really well, and that we should all feel really proud of having created and having worked on, but might not be quite right for an award entry. And I'll probably go through kind of some of the criteria. So we're quite selective in what we put through. We do enter, the awards that we're interested in. We're really interested in AMEC, because we're really interested in increased, I suppose, importance of evaluation for our clients, improving our worth. So a couple of pictures of us out and about having a good time, but what I'm going to talk you through now is a bit more top line in terms of the way that we approach entering awards. So I suppose first of all, you've got to start thinking about the campaigns that you've done in the last year or so. And I don't know, the way that we usually think about it is we sort of start at the end of last year and kind of work our way through the kind of awards calendar. And I've got to say that some campaigns that you've entered once, and if they didn't get through, just have a think about how you wrote them, because sometimes the rewrite can actually help get them through. I do find that every time you rewrite an entry, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger as you're able to kind of cut down and get to the nub of what you really want to say. One of the things is we all work massively hard on campaigns. Not only yourself, but your teams have invested, above and beyond the call of duty to do amazing work. And it's really sad if that gets let down with a kind of really boring entry that people can't be asked to read because it's too dull. So I think if you just think about the effort that you're putting in and the team have put in and how hard they work to make something truly amazing, then I personally feel, because I write a lot of the entries at Red, and I also have judged a lot of entries from Amex PR Week Awards, that it's really your responsibility to make that campaign shine as best you can. The types of things that I think about when thinking about entries is not dissimilar to when you're doing the work. So you've got to kind of have your crack team around you to prepare it. And I know this may seem silly, but you do have to have more than one person involved in writing an entry. There's somebody who worked on it, who knows all the details, who knows every interesting thing that happened and was kind of at the coalface. And they can really help pull out why this was so interesting, and was there a particular amazing reaction from somebody, something that you're not going to get in a kind of review deck that you're looking at the system. Then you need to kind of think about who's going to edit it, who's got a really lovely turn of phrase, who's good at sort of bringing personality to writing, and somebody who perhaps was involved in the campaign but perhaps not day to day, who could have a sort of little bit of a step away from what actually happened and sort of see a line through it. And then you need to beautify it. Incredibly lucky at Red Consultants we have a whole kind of create design element to it, but who's going to make it look lovely and put in all those headers and help you source the imagery so that when you get something in front of you it's like a joy to read. Then finally, Paul's been very organized, and it's making me feel very bad about the lack of organization that I have in my AMEC Awards, but we haven't been quite as far as the peer review judging process, but we do always ensure that by somebody entirely unrelated to it, and so that not only can they pick up kind of spelling mistakes and silly mistakes, but they can also just sort of oversee the entire sort of strategy. So all those elements are really important for us. In terms of considerations, whether should you, spend some money on entering an award, the things that we think about first of all is outcomes. So did something real happen as a result? And it was great to hear Paul talking about not only, was he analysing media coverage, but that also they were commissioning sort of external analysis on whether that be, consumer sort of behaviour. Because something must have happened, somebody must have bought something, gone somewhere, share price increased, or there must have been internal satisfaction ratings were through the roof. Something real in the real world, not just in our kind of PR bubble of, yay, it went on the mail online, isn't that great, and 500 people commented. Something real must have happened, and if something real, we can't prove anything real happened, it's not even worth going there. And then this is the kicker. I've got to say, we do some amazing work on the left-hand side. We sell stuff through massively for a lot of our big retail clients. But you know what? It's just really good, solid, hard-working, perhaps best-in-class, excellent PR But if it's not got anything new, first, creative, it's not going to get through. And I think it's sad, and I think a little while ago I wrote a post about, can we have awards for just bloody good day-to-day excellence in a press office? But somebody's yet to start those awards. So in the meantime, you know, there often is something in there that you can identify that somebody hasn't done before or was done in a new way. How is that going to tell an engaging story? Also, sometimes it's kind of thinking about what the outcome was. So one that I did last year, which did really well in quite a few of the awards, was rather than focusing on the kind of positives, we actually focus a lot on SEO and the negatives and how we were supplanting negative coverage, which I think was probably a bit of a new approach in the categories that we were putting it in. So what's creative, and then it was also a really lovely creative campaign which helped. I always think about, beyond the analysis that we've got and the review document that we've done, because we've usually put something else, what else can you put in? And so, not too last minute, but there have been panicked calls to Gorkana saying, please can you just look at da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da for us, which they can turn around fairly fast. And also looking to the client. I mean, I must have 3 or 4 requests out with clients at the moment for data. What can you tell me? What happened in the business? This is where the coverage spike was. What's your website traffic look like? You know, what can you tell me? Even, you know, we had some stuff that came in that was really interesting, that we'd done a great PR campaign around a slightly, a difficult issue. People wouldn't take advertising around it, and the following year they would. So that's kind of business insight that I wouldn't have known if I hadn't been kind of banging the door down. And the clients are happy because they want to have something great to win. So look beyond what you've got and see what you can grab. And then plot the storyline. You need to make yourself a hero, or make the campaign a hero. What were the odds? You know, is it a really kind of, you know, busy industry where it's really difficult to get cut through? I kind of contextualizing, you know, what you were up against is really important, because the judges who are looking at your entry, they don't understand each market sector, and so you just probably need to put a few paragraphs or a few sentences into explaining this particular marketplace industry, and therefore why your campaign's so amazing and why you are in fact the hero. So in terms of kind of substance of your entry, AMEC framework, Barry smiling at me across the table, is always your starting point, but I should say it's only your starting point. You need to have worked it out into a way that works for your campaign and that's going to come across in an interesting way, but you should always start there. And things that I always put in my reviews and in my entries are things like, we use the, you know, not as a sort of opening sentence, but in the kind of notes underneath, or the, you know, the little asterisks that you put, you know, we used the AMEC framework, we did independent evaluation, you know, and all the little kind of by-the-by things, that just that it gives it as much kind of officiality. Not a word, is it? Now, this bit is really, really difficult. Every time I've seen an entry, you feel you've got to tell them everything that you did, because you did so much and you worked so hard and everybody did huge amounts, and you did this and you did that and you did this, and it all added up, and it's killing to try and read through that, and it also just confuses everybody. So unless it's absolutely essential to the plot line, I leave out swathes of kind of what we actually did. I don't leave out the results, because they fill into the total picture, but I very quickly surmise some of the sort of individual tactics of, you know, we sent out a press release, or, you know, we did a media roundtable, we did this, you know, people want to look at the creative elements of it. Benchmarking is another area where you really need to look at either what you've done beforehand, and you could benchmark it to your own campaigns to show how this was more effective, or equally you can go to your evaluation suppliers and say, you know, in this, you know, market, what is a good benchmark? And the benchmark might be on cost per thousand. The benchmark might be around sort of positive and negative coverage. But try and benchmark it again. And that's the reason that's really important, is because the judges, again, don't know your particular marketplace and don't know why your particular result is as good as you know it is. And then idiot proof. I can't tell you how many times I look at entries and I can't work out what the objective was and then what the result was. I mean, when I write entries, I mean, it's really daft, but I have a table and it says objectives, then it says outtakes, and then it says outcomes. And then that way, there is absolutely no way of a judge getting confused about the fact that you met, exceeded, and overshot the objectives that you were set. So that should be a very simple, easy part, just easy to understand of your entry. In terms of the strategy, you do need to work at selling it. And again, it's going back to what we did in our campaign X. And we went here and we went there, and this happened, and then the speaker did this. It's not award-worthy as why you did it. So how did you come to the conclusion that that would be a good thing to do? What was the insight that you had, either as a business or just as a PR person? We had noticed that coverage for X really spiked around this particular subject, put some sort of stat in there, which was the reason that we employed this particular technique, be it a DTC or a stunt or a photo story. Because what you're trying to get the judges to think is that, you guys are big, often brains who've been working to kind of really strategically think about why this creative was going to work. And you should have kind of known it was going to work before it worked. And the only way that you're going to know that is if you had an insight that you're able to then share. So I'm getting near the end here, but onto style and storytelling. And this is back to kind of finding somebody who's got a really nice kind of way with words to help you kind of mold the storyline. Just the way that Paul's, given us talk around a sort of particular theme, or, just added some warmth to it. It can't just be a kind of factual document. I mean, obviously it needs to be factual, and it should be proofed and checked, and, having had your clients have a look at it, but it does have to have a kind of emotion and warmth and wit, and you can include storytelling. And my example here is that, I really struggle with history and remembering kind of dates and facts, and so recently I've really taken up with kind of, historical fiction, which is amazing. Love a bit of Philippa Gregory. I know so much more about the War of the Roses than I ever did before because she's told it in an engaging way. I know it's not all completely kind of, accurate, but, which book are you going to want to read, the left or the right? So, I'm not saying fictionalize your entries here at all. I am saying just add, an element of interest to them. And the killer thing for me, and all awards, AMEC included, have them. What's your summary? What's your intro? If you have not made that really interesting, the judge is far less likely to be wanting to read the rest of it and pay attention to it. I read all of my entries to the very bottom, but I'm not sure that every judge on every set of awards would do that. So if your intro is not amazing, you might lose out. The ruthless edit. So AMEC doesn't have a word count on it. Most awards do. And I think it is a good thing because people just fill page after page after page after page. And I think what's happened with a lot of awards is they've just sort of told you to cut them down. As Paul said, it's evening, the judge is sitting there, with his laptop out or with a pile of paper, the television's calling your name, you really, have said you would do this, you've committed to it, but it's inevitably outside your working hours. So are you going to enjoy a nice, short, concise, brilliantly written entry? Probably much so than a long one where people have just copied and pasted bits in from different review docs. So try and think of the judges. Cut as much detail as you can. As we said, you don't need to tell the whole story. And I find it very useful to work with pictures. And not only of your campaign, but sometimes to show a problem. For a campaign that we were doing for Federation of Bakers around carbs before marbs, it's all to do with bread making you fat. Actually, one of the images we put in there was some of the negative publicity that the client and the industry was receiving, so that that contextualized the issue. Rather than writing a whole paragraph, you just stick a nice kind of Daily Mail headline on there of the problem. So I encourage you to add visuals. And And then engage a fresh pair of senior eyes, demand that they cut down a copy, say, I want like 60 words gone by the time I see it back tomorrow. It's much more difficult to cut your own copy because you've painstakingly written every word and you obviously think it's genius, whereas somebody else will just cut out full sentences or whole paragraphs even, which is really what you want. And then, you know, give yourself a break before the final proof. I know there is a week or so to go before the first entry, but I would encourage you to make sure you leave some time in order to talk it through. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to Paul and Emily. Now we're going to take a look at questions. Let's take a look. There's a question here that is targeted at Paul. What did the market research involve, Paul, that you spoke about? How big was the sample?
Okay, that's a very technical question. So there were two types of market research. One was a piece of market research that we conducted ourselves through YouGov, which is a survey of 10,000 people. That was to understand the media that the target audiences of Nesta would have read, to understand whether they would have been reached by the coverage. The second set of market research was the survey that Nesta did themselves. Now that was against all registrants of the prize, so it wasn't necessarily the number, it was the fact that it was 100% sample. So that answers that question.
Okay, good. And there was a question here, are we able to circulate the deck after today's call? Yes, we'll make it available, probably from the AMEC website, amecorg.com, and probably also from Gorkana as well. In terms of reminding ourselves what the next steps are for the AMEC Awards, the early bird deadline is the 12th of February, but don't worry about that too much because the final deadline isn't until the 26th of February. We're rather hoping we can make this the biggest yet. It's the only international award scheme for communications measurement, and all the winners will be announced at the AMEC International Summit